I wiped down the bar for what felt like the 100th time tonight. The sticky residue of spilled beer and sweet liquor refusing to come clean, no matter how hard I scrubbed. The smell of cheap vodka mixed with sweat and too much cologne hung thick in the air of Murphy's, the dive bar in Brooklyn where I'd been slinging drinks for the past 3 years. Friday nights were always chaos, but tonight felt different. Heavier somehow. "Lauren, table 6 needs another round." Danny, the owner, barely looked up from counting cash at the register. His thick Brooklyn accent always got worse when he was stressed, and judging by the deep crease between his eyebrows, tonight qualified. On it. I grabbed a tray and loaded it with 4 bottles of domestic beer, checking my watch. 11:30. Another hour and a half until closing. Then the real work began. Cleaning, restocking, counting tips that never quite covered what Ryan and I needed to survive. My son, 8 years old, and currently sitting in the cramped break room behind the kitchen, probably still bent over his math homework. The thought of him back there, surrounded by boxes of liquor and the industrial sink that perpetually dripped, made my chest tighten. This wasn't the childhood I'd imagined giving him. But imagination and reality rarely shook hands in my world. I delivered the beers to table 6, a group of construction workers who'd been nursing the same drinks for hours, making them last because paychecks were thin and Friday nights were sacred. They nodded their thanks, and I headed back to the bar where a new customer waited. "What can I get you?" I asked, already reaching for a glass. "Just water for now." The man had kind eyes, weathered skin that spoke of long days outdoors. "Your boy doing all right back there?" I blinked, caught off guard. "You know Ryan? Saw him when I went to use the restroom. Smart kid, doing homework on a Friday night." He smiled. "You're raising him right." The compliment warmed me more than it should have. Trying to. The door chimed as someone entered, and I glanced up out of habit. 2 men in dark suits stepped inside, immediately out of place among the regulars in their work boots and flannel shirts. They moved with a kind of precision that set my teeth on edge, their eyes scanning the bar, like they were cataloging every face, every exit. Danny noticed them too. I watched him stiffen, his hand hovering near the baseball bat he kept under the register. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" His voice carried across the bar, louder than necessary. The taller of the 2 men ignored him, his gaze landing on me. Something cold slithered down my spine. I forced myself to keep wiping glasses, to appear busy and uninterested. They approached the bar, and I got my first good look at them. Expensive suits, perfectly tailored. Hair styled with product that probably cost more than my electric bill. The taller one had a scar above his left eyebrow, barely visible but there if you knew to look. The shorter one wore a pinky ring that caught the overhead lights. "We're looking for someone," Scarface said. His accent was subtle but present. Italian, I thought. Small place like this. Everyone knows everyone, right? Depends on who you're looking for. Danny came around the bar, positioning himself between them and me. Protective, which I appreciated, even if it was probably pointless against men like these. Maybe the lady can help us. Pinky Ring's eyes fixed on me, and I felt pinned like a butterfly under glass. "You work here long?" "Long enough." I set down the glass I'd been polishing. "But I don't know everyone who comes through. We get a lot of people." Pinky Ring stepped closer. Too close. I caught a whiff of his cologne, something expensive and woody that didn't belong in a place like Murphy's. "You got ink on your wrist there. Cherry blossoms. Pretty." My hand automatically moved to cover the small tattoo on my left wrist. I'd gotten it when I was 21, fresh out of a failed relationship and desperate to reclaim something of myself. Just a simple design. A branch with 3 cherry blossoms, 1 falling. "Thanks." I took a deliberate step backward. Interesting choice. Scarface leaned against the bar, casual, but somehow threatening. "Those flowers mean anything special to you?" "They're just flowers." Confusion mixed with my growing unease. "Look, if you're not ordering anything, we need to talk to you." Pinky Ring's voice dropped lower. "In private. I'm working. It'll only take a minute." Danny moved closer. "The lady said she's working. You want to talk, you can do it here or not at all." The 2 men exchanged a look, something wordless passing between them. Then Scarface shrugged. "Fine. Have it your way." They left, the door swinging shut behind them. But I could see them through the grimy window. Standing on the sidewalk, Watching. What the hell was that about? Danny muttered. I have no idea, but my hands were shaking as I picked up another glass. The next hour crawled by. The men outside eventually moved, disappearing around the corner. But I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me. Last call came and went. Customers trickled out. By 12:45, only the construction worker remained, nursing his final beer. I need to grab more napkins from the back, I told Danny, almost out. Make it quick. I want to close up. The hallway leading to the storage room was narrow and poorly lit, the single bulb flickering like it might give up any second. My footsteps echoed off the concrete walls. Halfway down, I heard movement behind me. I turned. Scarface and Pinky Ring blocked the hallway, their presence filling the cramped space. How did you... The words died in my throat as Scarface grabbed my arm, his grip bruising. You're going to tell us what we want to know. His face was inches from mine, breath hot and smelling of mint gum. Where are the shipments going? What did you tell them? I don't know what you're talking about. Panic clawed at my chest. I'm a bartender, I don't... Pinky Ring shoved me against the wall, the impact rattling my teeth. Don't play stupid. We know what that tattoo means. 3 petals, the Yamaguchi mark. The what? My mind spun. It's just a tattoo. I got it at a shop in... Where are they moving the territory? Scarface's hand moved to my throat, not squeezing but threatening. Talk, or this gets worse. I don't know anything. Tears burned my eyes. Please, I have a son. Then you better start remembering. Pinky Ring pulled back his fist. The blow caught me across the cheek, white-hot pain exploding through my skull. I tasted blood, felt my lip split. Another hit, this one to my ribs, drove the air from my lungs. Somewhere distant, I heard a sound. A door opening. Small footsteps. No. God. No, not Ryan. But the men were focused on me, and I couldn't see past them, couldn't call out. Another impact, this one to my stomach, and I doubled over, gasping. Then, the footsteps ran. Fast. Away. Lombardi's occupied a corner in Manhattan's Chelsea neighborhood, all warm lighting and exposed brick, the kind of place where reservations took weeks and prices made most people blink twice. Inside, at a private table near the back, Anthony Lombardi cut into his ossobuco with surgical precision. The shipment arrived on schedule. Marco, his second, sat to his left. No complications. Good. Anthony took a sip of Barolo, letting the wine roll over his tongue. Around him, 3 of his most trusted associates discussed logistics, territory, the mundane details of running an empire that existed in shadows. He was 34, though most days he felt older. The weight of responsibility aged a man faster than time ever could. He'd inherited his father's business at 19, too young and too angry, and spent the last 15 years building something that would have made the old man proud. The restaurant was his legitimate face, award-winning Italian cuisine, a sommelier who'd trained in Tuscany, a reputation that attracted celebrities and politicians alike. Everything clean, everything legal. What happened in the back rooms and warehouses scattered across 3 boroughs, that was different. Mr. Lombardi, his head of security, Vincent, appeared at his shoulder. We have a situation. Anthony set down his fork. What kind of situation? Before Vincent could answer, the front door burst open. A child stumbled inside, soaking wet, small chest heaving with sobs. The hostess started toward him, but the boy dodged past her, running straight for Anthony's table. Security moved immediately, 2 men stepping into the child's path, but something made Anthony raise his hand. Wait. The boy, 8 or 9 years old, blonde hair plastered to his head, eyes wild with terror, stopped 3 feet from the table. He was shaking so violently his teeth chattered. Please, the boy gasped. You have to help. They're hurting her. They're hurting my mom. Anthony leaned forward, his voice carefully controlled. Slow down. Tell me what happened. These men, at the bar where she works, they followed her and they're hitting her and she's bleeding and... The words tumbled over each other, barely coherent. What men? What did they look like? The boy wiped his nose with the back of his hand, trying to steady his breathing. Tall, Dark suits. One had a scar here. He pointed above his eyebrow. The other wore a big ring. They spoke funny, not quite American. Ice settled in Anthony's stomach. Italian accents? The boy nodded frantically. I ran. I found this card at the bar and I took the bus and I ran. Your men hurt my mom. The boy's voice cracked, rising to a scream that silenced the entire restaurant. Find out who. Now! Anthony's jaw tightened. Those descriptions, Carlo and Stefano, two of his enforcers. But he'd given no orders for any operations in Brooklyn tonight. Nothing that would involve civilians. He stood, his movement fluid despite the rage coiling in his gut. Marco, Luca, get to Murphy's bar in Brooklyn. Immediately. Bring the woman here. Safely. His voice dropped to something lethal. And bring Carlo and Stefano with her. They have explaining to do. The two men left without a word, moving with the speed of those who knew better than to question orders. Anthony crouched down, bringing himself to the child's eye level. What's your name? Ryan. The boy was still shaking, shock setting in. Ryan, I'm Anthony. Your mother, what's her name? Lauren. Lauren Mitchell. Is she going to be okay? They were really hurting her. And I left her. You did the right thing. Anthony placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, feeling how small he was, how fragile. You came for help. That was brave. My men are getting her right now. But what if... No what ifs. She's going to be fine. Anthony didn't make promises he couldn't keep, but he'd make damn sure this one held true. He looked at Vincent. Get the boy some dry clothes, food, something warm to drink. Keep him comfortable. Yes, sir. As Vincent led Ryan toward the back, Anthony returned to his table. The three associates had gone silent, reading the situation correctly. When their boss's voice went that quiet, that controlled, someone was about to pay in blood. 20 minutes later, Marco and Luca returned. They brought Lauren Mitchell first. A blonde woman in her late 20s, lip split, already forming bruise on her cheek, cradling her ribs. She looked terrified and defiant in equal measure, a combination Anthony recognized from his mirror on particularly bad days. Behind her, Carlo and Stefano entered, flanked by two more guards. Both men had the decency to look nervous. Anthony gestured for Lauren to sit, then turned his attention to his wayward employees. Explain. Now. The ride to Lombardi's took 20 minutes that felt like 20 hours. I sat in the back of a black SUV, wedged between Ryan and a man named Luca, who kept glancing at me like I might shatter. Maybe I would. My entire body felt like one massive bruise, ribs screaming with every breath, lip throbbing where it had split. The metallic taste of blood lingered in my mouth no matter how many times I swallowed. Ryan pressed against my side, his small hand clutching mine with desperate strength. He hadn't spoken since the men, Marco and Luca, they'd introduced themselves, had found us in the hallway of Murphy's. Danny had been shouting about calling the police. But Marco had shown him something, a badge or card I couldn't see, and suddenly Danny went quiet, compliant, terrified. That terrified me more than the beating had. The restaurant looked different at night. All golden light spilling through massive windows onto the street. Beautiful. Expensive. The kind of place I'd walked past 1,000 times without ever imagining I'd enter. Now I was being escorted through a side entrance, away from the main dining room where I could hear the murmur of conversation and the clink of silverware on china. They brought me to a private room in the back. The man from before, Anthony, Ryan had called him, stood as we entered. He'd removed his suit jacket, rolled his sleeves to his elbows. In the warm light, I could see him more clearly than I had in my panicked first impression. Tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair that fell across his forehead when he moved. Strong jaw, olive skin, eyes so dark they looked black until the light hit them and revealed flecks of amber. He was younger than I'd expected, mid-30s at most, but carried himself with the authority of someone much older. Sit. His voice was gentler than before, but still carried an edge of command that made my spine straighten automatically. I sank into the offered chair, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. Ryan climbed into my lap despite being too big for it, his arms wrapping around my neck. Ryan, why don't you come with me? A woman appeared, older, kind-faced, speaking with a soft Italian accent. "We have hot chocolate and some books in the kitchen. Your mama needs the doctor to look at her. I don't want to leave her." Ryan's voice was muffled against my shoulder. "I'll be right here," I managed, though my voice sounded strange to my own ears. "Go on, baby. I'm okay." He pulled back, studying my face with those two old eyes. 8 years old, and he'd already seen too much. Tonight had just added to the collection of traumas I couldn't protect him from. "Promise?" "Promise." He let the woman, Teresa, she'd introduced herself, lead him away, glancing back 3 times before disappearing through a doorway. The moment he was gone, Anthony moved. Not toward me, but toward the 2 men who'd attacked me. They stood against the wall, flanked by guards, their earlier confidence completely evaporated. "Explain." One word. Quiet. But the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The one with the scar, Carlo, spoke first, words tumbling over each other. "We received a tip this afternoon. Anonymous call to the line we use for information. Said the Yamaguchi were moving someone into Brooklyn. A woman with the mark. Working at Murphy's bar. We thought—" "You thought?" Anthony's voice was still quiet, but something dangerous threaded through it. "You received an anonymous tip and decided to act on it without verification, without authorization, without even confirming the woman was actually connected to the Yamaguchi. We wanted to prove ourselves. The other one, Stefano with the pinky ring, at least had the decency to look ashamed. Show initiative. The Yamaguchi have been pushing into our territory and you thought beating an innocent civilian would demonstrate what exactly?" Anthony took a step closer to them. "Your intelligence? Your judgment? Your value to this organization?" I watched, confused and frightened in equal measure, as Anthony systematically dismantled whatever explanations they tried to offer. He never raised his voice, never made overt threats, but the 2 men shrank before him like children being scolded by a particularly terrifying parent. "You acted without orders," Anthony said finally. "You compromised our operations by targeting a civilian in a public location. You brought police attention to one of our information networks. And worst of all, you were so eager to prove yourselves that you never stopped to think you might be walking into a trap. That got their attention." Both men's heads snapped up. "A trap?" Carlo's voice cracked slightly. "An anonymous tip leading you to attack an innocent woman? One who just happens to have a tattoo that superficially resembles Yamaguchi identification?" Anthony's jaw tightened. "Someone wanted you to make this mistake. Someone wanted this exact scenario. Our men hurting a civilian, creating chaos, possibly drawing law enforcement interest. And you handed it to them without question." The room fell silent except for my own ragged breathing. A trap. This was a trap. But for whom? "Get them out of my sight," Anthony said quietly. "Put them in the warehouse. I'll decide their punishment later." The guards moved immediately, escorting Carlo and Stefano out. Neither man protested. The door closed behind them with a soft click, and suddenly Anthony and I were alone. He turned to me, and I instinctively pressed back in my chair. "I'm not going to hurt you." He spoke like he was addressing a frightened animal. Maybe that's what I looked like. "I need to see your injuries. My doctor is on the way, but I have medical training. Will you let me help? Who are you?" My voice came out hoarse. "Really? Not just that you own a restaurant. Who are you?" He studied me for a long moment, then pulled a chair around to sit facing me. Close, but not crowding. "My name is Anthony Lombardi. I own this restaurant and several other legitimate businesses throughout the city. I also have interests that extend beyond the culinary world. I oversee operations that maintain order in certain communities, protection, dispute resolution. Things the police can't or won't handle. You're a criminal, not a question. I operate outside certain legal frameworks, yes." He didn't flinch from the accusation. "But I'm not what those men were. I don't target innocents. I don't attack women. And I sure as hell don't let my people act without authorization. I want to go to the police." I straightened, despite the pain in my ribs. "I want to report what happened. Those men assaulted me. I have rights." "You do." Anthony nodded. "And if you want to go to the police, I won't stop you. But I need you to understand something first. Someone set this up. Someone wanted my men to find you, to attack you, maybe to create internal problems in my organization, maybe to draw law enforcement attention, maybe both. But if you go to the police now, you become a witness, a very visible witness. And whoever orchestrated this, they'll know you're a loose end. Ice slid through my veins. Are you threatening me? No. He leaned forward, intensity burning in those dark eyes. I'm trying to protect you. Whoever did this knows where you work. They know your routine. They know you have a son. If they're willing to manipulate my organization to get to you, or to me through you, they won't stop just because you file a police report. So what do you suggest? Anger finally began cutting through the fear. That I just pretend this didn't happen? Go back to work tomorrow and hope nobody tries to kill me? I suggest you let me help you. He stood, moving to a cabinet against the wall and pulling out what looked like a comprehensive first aid kit. I can offer you protection while I investigate who's behind this. Financial compensation for your injuries and time away from work. A safe place to stay until we sort this out. I don't want your money. The words came out sharper than I intended. I'm not taking payment for being assaulted by your men. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe. Fair. Then consider it employment. I need someone I can trust in a visible position while I investigate. You work for me, legitimately, with a real salary. That puts you under my protection without it looking like charity. Work for you? I almost laughed, then stopped because it hurt too much. Doing what? I'm a bartender with a high school diploma. What possible use could you have for me? You're studying for your sommelier certification. At my shocked look, he gestured to the small purse they'd brought from the bar. Marco grabbed your things. Your study materials were in your bag. You're taking the level 1 exam next month. I'd forgotten about that. The books I'd been carrying, the flashcards I'd made on breaks between customers. My desperate attempt to build a better future for Ryan and me through wine education of all things. How does that? My head sommelier is leaving at the end of the month. Family emergency in Tuscany. I need someone to apprentice under him before he goes. Someone who can eventually take over the position. The salary is $2,000 a week. It's real work. Honest work. But it also means you're here, where I can ensure your safety. $2,000 a week. That was more than I made in a month at Murphy's. And Ryan? There's a private school 3 blocks from here. I have connections with the board. He can start Monday. Full scholarship. Why? I searched his face for deception, for the catch I knew had to be there. Why would you do any of this for a stranger? For someone your men just beat up? Anthony set down the first aid kit and met my eyes directly. Because my organization operates on 2 principles: loyalty and honor. Carlo and Stefano violated both tonight. They acted without orders. They targeted a civilian, and they brought shame to my name. That requires restitution. You were harmed because of my men's actions. That makes you my responsibility. So this is guilt. This is obligation. He opened the kit, pulling out antiseptic and gauze. Now let me look at your injuries before my doctor arrives and yells at both of us for letting you sit here bleeding. I should have refused. Should have walked out of that restaurant, taken Ryan and disappeared into the night. But as I watched Anthony Lombardi carefully clean the blood from my split lip, his hands surprisingly gentle for someone who'd just threatened his own men with unspecified punishment, I realized I had no better options. Someone had targeted me tonight. Someone knew where I worked, where I was vulnerable. Going home meant being alone, unprotected, waiting for the next attack. Here, in this strange restaurant that smelled of fresh bread and expensive wine, surrounded by men who radiated controlled violence, I was somehow safer. 1 week, I heard myself say. I'll try this for 1 week. Then I decide if I stay. Anthony's hands paused in their work, then resumed. 1 week. That's fair. When the doctor arrived, a gray-haired man who asked no questions and examined me with professional efficiency, Anthony stepped out to give me privacy. The diagnosis was what I'd suspected. Cracked rib, extensive bruising, minor concussion. Nothing life-threatening, nothing permanent. But as I sat in that private room, listening to muffled voices through the walls and catching glimpses of Ryan laughing with Teresa in the kitchen, I knew nothing about my life would ever be the same. By 3 a.m, Anthony had arranged everything. A suite at a boutique hotel in Midtown, discreet and secure. A car to take us there. Instructions to report to the restaurant at 10 the next morning to meet the current sommelier. "Get some rest," he said as he walked us to the car. "Tomorrow we start figuring out who set you up, and why." I nodded, too exhausted to form words. Ryan had fallen asleep against my side, his small body finally releasing the tension that had kept him wired all night. As the car pulled away, I looked back to see Anthony still standing in the doorway, watching us go. His expression was unreadable, but something about his stance, protective, possessive, made my stomach tighten with an emotion I couldn't name. 1 week, I reminded myself. Just 1 week to figure out my next move. I had no idea I'd just agreed to change my entire life. 7 days at Lombardi's, and I still felt like an imposter walking through those heavy oak doors every morning. The restaurant had a rhythm to it, a pulse that I was only beginning to understand. The scent of fresh bread baking mingled with the earthy aroma of truffles being shaved over handmade pasta. Wine bottles lined the walls like leather-bound books in a library, each one holding secrets I was learning to decode. This one, Giovanni, the current head sommelier, held up a bottle of Barolo. His hands were spotted with age, but steady as he poured a small amount into my glass. "Tell me what you taste." I swirled the wine, watching it coat the sides of the glass, then brought it to my nose. Cherry, tar, maybe rose petals. I took a careful sip, letting it sit on my tongue. The tannins are firm but not aggressive. There's this earthiness underneath, like walking through a forest after rain. Giovanni's weathered face creased into what might have been approval. "You have a nose, and a palate. Most importantly, you have the words." He set the bottle down with care. "Wine is storytelling, Lauren. You tell the customer why this Barolo will make their Audiobook sing. You make them taste the Piedmont hills, the autumn harvests, the hands that picked each grape." Over his shoulder, I caught a flicker of movement. The security camera in the corner, its lens pointed toward us. I'd noticed them everywhere. Discreet, professional, constantly watching. I wondered if Anthony was in his office now, observing this lesson through a screen. The thought made my skin prickle with an awareness I tried to ignore. Again, Giovanni poured from a different bottle, this one from Tuscany. Compare. The morning passed in a blur of varietals and vintages. By noon, my palate felt exhausted, my notebook filled with tasting notes and handwriting that grew increasingly illegible. The executive chef, a temperamental genius named Marco, not the same Marco who'd brought me here that first night, stopped by to consult on wine pairings for the evening's special. "The duck," he said, his accent thick and musical. "I'm doing it with a cherry gastrique and roasted fennel. What wine?" I hesitated, aware of Giovanni watching me. This was a test. "The Amarone," I said finally. "The 2015. It has enough body to stand up to the duck fat, and the dried cherry notes will complement the gastrique without fighting it. The slight bitterness in the finish will cut through the richness." Marco stared at me for a long moment, then turned to Giovanni. "She's good. Keep her." After he left, I released a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "You're learning fast," Giovanni observed. "Too fast, perhaps. Makes me wonder why you were wasting your talent in a Brooklyn dive bar. Bills don't pay themselves." I kept my tone light, but the question stung because it was accurate. I'd known I was capable of more. I just never had the opportunity to prove it. By 2 o'clock, I was exhausted but exhilarated. I changed out of the simple black dress I wore for training, part of the professional wardrobe Anthony had provided, along with everything else, and headed toward the private school where Ryan was finishing his 4th day. The building was all red brick and ivy, the kind of place that screamed old money and legacy admissions. I'd walked past institutions like this my entire life without ever imagining my son would attend one. Now he did, courtesy of a man who operated on both sides of the law and seemed determined to reshape our lives whether we wanted it or not. I was halfway there when my phone rang. The school's number. "Ms. Mitchell, this is Principal Hartley. I'm afraid we need you to come in. There's been an incident involving Ryan." My stomach dropped. What kind of incident? Is he hurt? "He's fine physically, but there was an altercation. Please come as soon as possible." I arrived 15 minutes later, my heart pounding. They led me to the principal's office where Ryan sat in a chair that dwarfed him, his jaw set in that stubborn line I recognized from my own mirror. His knuckles were scraped, a bruise forming on his cheekbone. "Baby, what happened?" I crouched in front of him, checking his face. "I'm okay, Mom." Principal Hartley, a severe woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair pulled into a tight bun, cleared her throat. Ryan came to the defense of another student who was being bullied by several older boys. While I commend his protective instincts, our school has a strict zero-tolerance policy regarding physical violence. They were hurting him. Ryan's voice was quiet but firm. Tommy's smaller than them, and they were calling him names and pushing him. I told them to stop. They didn't. "So you hit them?" Not a question. "So I made them stop." He met my eyes without flinching. "You always said to protect people who can't protect themselves." God, what had I taught him? That the world required violence to navigate? That protection meant fists and fighting? I saw myself reflected in his 8-year-old face. Always ready to battle. Always convinced force was the only language certain people understood. "I appreciate your honesty, Ryan." Principal Hartley's voice softened slightly. "And your courage. But there are better ways to handle these situations. We have teachers, administrators, protocols." The teachers didn't see it happening. Ryan's jaw tightened. I did. We talked for another 20 minutes. Ryan's actions, the school's policies, the consequences. Detention for a week, mandatory conflict resolution sessions. By the time we left, the bruise on his cheek had darkened to purple. "Am I in trouble?" he asked quietly as we walked. "No, baby, you're not." I pulled him close, kissing the top of his head. "But we need to find better ways for you to be brave. Ways that don't involve your fists. Like you did with those men at the bar?" The question stopped me cold. He'd seen more than I realized that night. Understood more. That was different. How? I had no good answer. That evening, after Ryan was settled with Teresa in the restaurant's private apartment upstairs, another provision Anthony had made, a safe place for my son while I worked, I focused on preparing for dinner service. Giovanni walked me through the wine list, testing my knowledge, correcting my pronunciation of Italian regions. "You'll take some tables tonight," he announced. "Simple pairings only. I'll be watching." My first customer was a couple celebrating their anniversary. The husband wanted something special, something that would impress. I recommended a Brunello, explaining its structure and aging potential, describing the Tuscan hillsides where the Sangiovese grapes grew. They ordered it. When they left, they pressed a generous tip into my hand and thanked me for making their night special. By the time service ended at 11, I was floating on adrenaline and accomplishment. "Lauren," Anthony's voice cut through my euphoria. He stood in the doorway to his office, still wearing the dress shirt and slacks from earlier, though he'd rolled his sleeves up. "Do you have a moment?" My stomach tightened. This was it. He'd heard about Ryan's fight. We were being kicked out, sent back to our real lives where we belonged. Of course. I followed him into the office, a space I'd only glimpsed before. Dark wood, leather furniture, shelves lined with books in English and Italian. The security monitors occupied one wall, multiple screens showing different angles of the restaurant. He gestured for me to sit, then closed the door. The click of the latch felt ominous. "Ryan's fine," I said quickly. "The school called and I handled it. He got into a fight defending another kid, but it won't happen again. I talked to him about—" "This isn't about Ryan's fight." Anthony leaned against his desk, arms crossed. "Though I heard about it. The principal called me as well. I'm on the board." Of course he was. "Then what?" "My investigation." His expression was difficult to read. "I found who sent the anonymous tip that led Carlo and Stefano to you." I waited, my heart pounding. The call came from a burner phone purchased in Chinatown. The voice was disguised, impossible to identify definitively. But based on the phrasing and terminology used, my tech people believe it originated from someone connected to the Yamaguchi clan. The name meant nothing to me beyond what I'd heard that first night. The Japanese crime organization. Yes. They've been pushing into territories that traditionally belonged to Italian families, creating chaos, testing boundaries. He paused. "Someone wanted my men to attack you." to create internal problems, maybe to draw law enforcement attention to my operations. Why me? My voice came out smaller than intended. I'm nobody. That's what I thought initially. But my people dug deeper. He moved to a filing cabinet, pulled out a folder, and set it on the desk between us. Your tattoo? The cherry blossoms. What about it? Open the folder. With trembling hands, I did. Inside were photographs, surveillance images of Asian women, all of them bearing tattoos identical to mine. 3 cherry blossoms on a branch, 1 petal falling. This is the mark the Yamaguchi used to identify their couriers, Anthony said quietly. Women who transport messages, money, sometimes drugs. The 3 petals represent loyalty, service, discretion. The falling petal represents sacrifice. The room tilted. I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know. I got it when I was 21. I thought it was pretty. The artist never said, I believe you. He cut through my panic. The shop you went to in Park Slope? I checked. They've been closed for 6 years. The artist died in a car accident. Whoever gave you that tattoo either didn't know its significance or thought it was harmless. But the Yamaguchi don't think it's harmless. No. His jaw tightened. They think you're either one of theirs who went rogue, or they think you're working for me. Either way, you're a target now. Not just from the anonymous tip, but because you're visible. Working at my restaurant. Connected to my organization. So what do? I stood, needing to move, to pace. I can't exactly remove it. You leave Manhattan. You and Ryan both. I have a property in Hoboken, secure and private. You'll stay there until this is resolved. No. The word came out sharper than intended. We just got settled. Ryan just started school. I just started learning this job. I'm not running again. Lauren, I've spent 8 years running. From bad decisions, from Ryan's father, from every opportunity that scared me. I'm done running. Anthony moved closer, his presence filling the space between us. This isn't about fear. This is about survival. Look at these. He pulled out another set of photographs. Security camera footage, grainy but clear. Asian men in dark clothing, watching the hotel where Ryan and I had been staying. Different angles, different times, but always watching. They know where you are. Anthony said quietly. They're patient. They're organized. And they won't stop just because you refuse to acknowledge the danger. I stared at the images, my earlier confidence crumbling. Those men had been watching Ryan, watching my baby. How long? My voice cracked. How long do we have to hide? Until I negotiate a truce? Or until I make it clear that harming you means war with my entire organization? His hand rose, hovering near my shoulder but not quite touching. I won't let them hurt you, Lauren. Either of you. But I need you to trust me. I need you to let me protect you. I looked up at him. This man who'd entered my life through violence and chaos, who'd given me a job and safety and opportunities I'd never imagined. His dark eyes held something I couldn't name. Intensity, determination, maybe something deeper. One condition, I said finally. Ryan keeps going to school, even if it means extra security, extra precautions. He's finally somewhere he can thrive. I won't take that from him. Done. No hesitation. I'll arrange for discreet protection. He won't even know they're there. And I keep working here, learning, building something. You'll commute from Hoboken. It's 20 minutes by ferry. I nodded slowly, acknowledging defeat, or maybe survival. Sometimes they look the same. The house in Hoboken was nothing like I expected. Anthony had called it a property, which felt too modest for what I found when the black SUV pulled up 3 days after our conversation in his office. 3 stories of modern architecture tucked behind a privacy fence that looked decorative, but was clearly reinforced steel beneath the elegant woodwork. Wide windows, a manicured lawn, security cameras positioned at every corner, with the kind of subtlety that suggested serious money had been spent making them blend in. It's huge, Ryan breathed beside me, his nose pressed against the car window. Vincent, the head of security who'd driven us, smiled slightly. Mr. Lombardi wanted you both to be comfortable. The property has good bones, safe neighborhood, good schools. Safe. The word had taken on new meaning in my vocabulary. Safe now meant cameras and guards and locks that required codes I had to memorize. Safe meant knowing that men with guns patrolled the perimeter while Ryan slept. Inside, the house was furnished but not lived in. Everything looked purchased specifically for us. Comfortable sofas in neutral tones, a kitchen stocked with groceries I hadn't bought, bedrooms with fresh linens that still had creases from packaging. My room overlooked the backyard, while Ryan's faced the street. Both had blackout curtains that I suspected were more than just light-blocking fabric. "There are panic buttons in every room," Vincent explained, showing me small devices disguised as decorative wall plates. "Press and hold for 3 seconds. Response time is under 2 minutes. 2 minutes for what?" Ryan asked, his 8-year-old curiosity overriding any fear. "For help to arrive, kiddo." Vincent crouched down to Ryan's level. "But you won't need them. This place is locked down tighter than Fort Knox. Nobody gets in unless we want them in." After Vincent left with promises to return for morning security briefings, Ryan immediately began exploring. I heard his footsteps racing upstairs, doors opening and closing, his excited voice calling out discoveries. "Mom, there's a library. An actual library with floor-to-ceiling shelves." I found him on the 2nd floor in a room I'd missed during my initial walkthrough. Books lined 3 walls. Everything from classic literature to encyclopedias to adventure novels that looked perfect for a curious 8-year-old. A leather armchair sat near the window, positioned to catch natural light. "Can I read these?" Ryan's hand hovered over a complete set of the Chronicles of Narnia. "I think that's why they're here." I ruffled his hair, grateful for something that made his eyes light up after weeks of fear and uncertainty. "Just take care of them." "I will. I promise." He was already pulling the first volume from the shelf, settling into the oversized chair with the book cradled against his chest. I left him there, needing space to process this new reality. Downstairs, I discovered motion sensors on every window, reinforced locks on every door. The basement held a security office with multiple monitors showing different angles of the property. The kitchen had a pantry larger than my old bedroom in Brooklyn. This wasn't just a house. It was a fortress disguised as suburban normalcy. The routine established itself faster than I expected. Mornings, Vincent or one of his team would drive Ryan to the private school in Hoboken. A brick building with ivy-covered walls and a playground that looked like it cost more than my annual salary. I'd watch until the SUV disappeared around the corner, then make my way to the ferry terminal. The 20-minute ride across the Hudson became my decompression time. Standing on the deck, watching Manhattan's skyline grow closer, I could almost pretend I was just another commuter, just another woman heading to work, not someone hiding from a Japanese crime syndicate because of a tattoo I'd gotten in a moment of youthful rebellion. At Lombardi's, Giovanni continued my education with patient determination. I learned the difference between Barbaresco and Barolo, memorized vineyard names in Tuscany, practiced explaining tannin structure to hypothetical customers. By the 2nd week in Hoboken, Giovanni let me handle an entire table, a group of business executives celebrating a promotion. They ordered a Tignanello, listened to my description of the Super Tuscan blend, and left me a tip that made my hands shake. "You're a natural," Giovanni said afterward, refilling my water glass. "Most people, they learn the facts. You understand the story. That's what makes a sommelier great." But it was the weekends that changed everything. Saturday morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and something baking. For a disoriented moment, I thought I'd dreamed the past 3 weeks, that I was back in Brooklyn, in my old apartment, in my old life. Then I remembered. Hoboken. The house. Security cameras tracking my every movement. I pulled on a robe and followed the aroma downstairs to find Anthony in the kitchen, an apron tied around his waist, flour dusting his forearms, fresh focaccia cooled on the counter, and something simmered on the stove that smelled like heaven and childhood memories combined. "You're cooking." The observation came out flat with surprise. "I cook every Saturday." He didn't look up from the pot he was stirring. "It's how I decompress. Better than drinking or breaking things." "I thought you just owned the restaurant." "I trained in Bologna. 3 years at a culinary institute, then another 2 working in family kitchens throughout Emilia-Romagna." He tasted whatever was in the pot, added a pinch of salt. "My father wanted me to understand every aspect of the business. Said you can't lead people if you don't understand their work. I moved closer, drawn by curiosity and the intoxicating smell. What are you making? Ragu. The real kind. It needs to simmer for hours, but it's worth the wait. He finally looked at me, and something in his expression made my breath catch. Softer than I'd seen him before. Almost vulnerable. I brought fresh bread and ingredients for a proper Italian lunch. Thought you and Ryan might enjoy something homemade. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. He turned back to the stove, but not before I caught the slight tension in his shoulders. Besides, I'm staying at the property in Jersey City this weekend. Early meeting Monday morning. Made sense to come here. Make sure everything's working properly. That was how it started. Anthony appearing every Saturday with ingredients and determination, taking over my kitchen like he'd been cooking there for years. Ryan would emerge from his library sanctuary, drawn by smells and curiosity, and the three of us would end up at the dining table for meals that tasted like something from a different, better life. The fourth Saturday, after Ryan had gone to bed with his stomach full of homemade ravioli, Anthony and I sat in the living room with wine. The conversation had meandered through safe topics, Ryan's progress at school, my advancement with Giovanni, the restaurant's excellent reviews that week. Then Anthony said, "Tell me about Ryan's father." The question shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. Why? Because you never mention him, and Ryan never asks about him. That kind of absence says something. I took a long sip of wine, buying time. His name was Jason. We met in college. I was 21, stupid, thought I knew what love looked like. The memories felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. When I told him I was pregnant, he disappeared, literally. Dropped out of school, moved back to California. His parents sent me a check and a note suggesting I take care of it. I kept the baby and the check. Used the money for diapers and formula. Your family? Disowned me. My parents were very religious, very conservative. A baby out of wedlock was unforgivable. I drained my glass. I haven't spoken to them in 8 years. Don't even know if they're still alive. Anthony refilled both our glasses without asking. Family is supposed to protect you, support you. When they don't, it's their failure, not yours. Sounds like you know something about family failure. My entire family died when I was 19. He said it matter-of-factly, like he was reporting the weather. Car bomb. My father was the target, but my mother and 2 younger sisters were with him. Wrong place, wrong time. Collateral damage in a war they had nothing to do with. The breath left my lungs. Oh my God. Anthony, Don't. He held up a hand. Don't apologize or say you're sorry. Everyone says that, and it doesn't help. They're dead. I'm alive. I took over my father's organization because someone had to. And I was the only one left. You were 19. I was old enough to understand revenge. Old enough to make the people responsible pay for what they'd done. His jaw tightened. The business, the empire, all of it. I never wanted it. But it was mine by blood and by necessity. So I learned. I adapted. I became what I needed to be to survive. We sat in silence, the weight of our shared traumas settling between us like a physical presence. Outside, I could hear the security team changing shifts, their quiet voices carrying through the open window. Why are you telling me this? I asked finally. Because I want you to understand. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, close enough that I could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. I didn't choose this life out of greed or ambition. I chose it out of survival and obligation. And now, somehow, you and Ryan are part of that. Part of what I protect. Part of what matters to me. The admission hung in the air, heavy with implications I wasn't ready to examine. I should have moved away, created distance, reminded both of us that this was temporary. Instead, I found myself leaning closer, drawn by something I couldn't name. The moment shattered when thunder cracked outside, so loud it rattled the windows. We both jumped, and I laughed shakily at our shared reaction. Storm's coming, Anthony observed, moving to close the window. Weather said it would be bad tonight. It was. By midnight, the wind howled around the house, rain hammering against the windows with surprising violence. I lay awake listening to it, remembering other storms, other nights when fear kept sleep away. Then I heard Ryan scream. I was out of bed and running before conscious thought kicked in, bursting into his room to find him thrashing in his sheets, still asleep, but caught in whatever nightmare had its claws in him. "Baby, wake up. Ryan, you're safe. You're home." I gathered him against my chest, feeling his heart race against mine. "It's okay. It's just a dream." His eyes flew open, wild and unseeing. "They're hurting you. Mom, they're hurting you and I can't stop them. I'm fine. I'm right here. Feel me." I pressed his hand against my chest over my heart. "I'm fine. Nobody's hurting me." Slowly, awareness returned to his eyes. He blinked, taking in his room, the familiar surroundings. Then he collapsed against me, sobbing with the kind of abandon that broke my heart into pieces. "It keeps happening," he choked out. "Every night. I see it over and over. Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't want you to worry more." I held him until the sobs quieted, until his breathing evened out, until he finally fell back into exhausted sleep. Only then did I realize Anthony was standing in the doorway, watching. "How long has this been happening?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know. Tonight's the first time he screamed loud enough for me to hear." Anthony stepped into the room, his gaze fixed on Ryan's sleeping face. "He needs help. Professional help." "I know. I don't know how to afford a good therapist. The insurance from the restaurant won't kick in until I've been there 3 months. I'll handle it." "No." I stood, carefully extricating myself from Ryan's grip. "I can't keep letting you pay for everything. I can't keep being indebted." "This isn't about debt." Anthony's jaw tightened. "This is about a child who's suffering because my men attacked his mother. That makes it my responsibility." I wanted to argue, but exhaustion and worry won out. "Fine. But I pay you back. Eventually. Whatever makes you accept help." He moved toward the door, then paused. "I'm staying in the guest room tonight. The storm, and I want to be here in case he has another nightmare." Yes, I should have protested that too. Should have maintained boundaries. Instead, I just nodded and watched him disappear down the hall. The next morning, I woke to my phone ringing. An unfamiliar number. "Ms. Mitchell? This is Dr. Sarah Park. Mr. Lombardi contacted me about your son Ryan. I specialize in childhood trauma, and I have an opening this Thursday afternoon if you'd like to bring him in." I stared at the phone, then at the ceiling, processing what this meant. Anthony had gone behind my back, made decisions about my child without consulting me, presumed he had the right to interfere in our lives because he felt guilty and responsible and whatever else drove him. I found him in the kitchen, making coffee like this was his house and not mine. "You called a therapist." Not a question. "I did. Without asking me. Without asking you." He handed me a cup, his expression unreadable. "I overstepped. I know that. But Ryan needs help, Lauren. Professional help from someone who understands trauma. And you need support so you're not carrying this alone. You don't get to make decisions about my son." "You're right. I don't." He met my eyes directly. "But I'm making them anyway because someone needs to, and you're too exhausted and worried to see what's right in front of you. Ryan is falling apart, and you're so busy trying to be strong for him that you can't admit you need help too." The truth of it hit harder than any punch. I sagged against the counter, the fight draining out of me. "I hate that you're right." "I know." Something that might have been sympathy crossed his face. "Dr. Park is excellent. She works with children who've witnessed violence. She won't judge, won't push, won't do anything except give Ryan tools to process what happened. And I pay you back for this too. And you pay me back." He didn't argue this time, which told me he understood. Accepting help was one thing. Being rescued was another. I needed to maintain some sense of control, some piece of my independence. Ryan started therapy that Thursday. Once a week after school, Vincent would drive him to Dr. Park's office in Hoboken. At first, Ryan was resistant, suspicious. But by the third session, he came home lighter somehow. Still struggling, still having nightmares, but beginning to talk about them, beginning to process. And somewhere in the routine of ferry rides and wine education, of Saturday dinners and Ryan's slow healing, I realized that my life had fundamentally changed. that the temporary arrangement I'd agreed to wasn't temporary anymore, that Anthony Lombardi had become woven into the fabric of our daily existence in ways I couldn't easily untangle. Whether I wanted to admit it or not, we'd become something that looked dangerously close to a family. 2 months in Hoboken, and the routine had become second nature. Ryan thrived at his new school, bringing home report cards that made my chest swell with pride. His nightmares had decreased from nightly occurrences to occasional bad dreams, and Dr. Park reported progress that felt like small miracles. He'd even made friends, real friends who came over for playdates in our fortress of a house, their parents never quite understanding why security cameras track their children playing soccer in the backyard. At Lombardi's, I'd graduated from apprentice to official sommelier. Giovanni had returned to Tuscany 3 weeks ago with tears in his eyes and a promise that I'd made him proud. My salary had jumped to $3,500 weekly, plus tips that sometimes doubled that amount. The money felt surreal. I'd opened a savings account, started paying Anthony back in small increments that he accepted without comment. And for the first time in 8 years, I wasn't terrified of checking my bank balance. The work itself was intoxicating in ways I hadn't anticipated. I'd developed a reputation among the restaurant's wealthy clientele, the sommelier who could read their tastes after 2 questions and a glance at their dinner order. Businessmen requested my section for important deals. Couples celebrating anniversaries asked for my wine pairing specifically. I'd found something I was genuinely exceptional at, and the validation felt like oxygen after years of suffocating. But with success came visibility. And visibility, in Anthony's world, meant vulnerability. Thursday night, 10 minutes before the kitchen closed, I was consulting with a table of 4 about dessert wines when commotion erupted near the entrance. Raised voices, unusual in Lombardi's carefully maintained atmosphere of refined elegance. I don't need a reservation. I'm family. The man pushing past the hostess was in his mid-40s, stocky, with silver threading through dark hair, slicked back from a face that had seen too many bar fights. His suit was expensive but worn carelessly. Tie loosened, top button undone. He moved through the dining room like he owned it, drawing stares from customers who recognized disruption when they saw it. "Sir, please." The hostess trailed after him, distress evident in her voice. "Where is he?" The man's eyes scanned the room. "Where's our beloved boss?" Anthony emerged from the kitchen, his expression carefully neutral, but I'd learned to read him over the past weeks, and I saw the tension in his shoulders, the slight narrowing of his eyes. "Silvio," Anthony's voice carried just far enough. "This is unexpected." "Unexpected?" Silvio laughed, the sound harsh and grating. "That's one word for it. Disrespectful is another. I've been trying to get a meeting with you for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of being shuffled to underlings and told you're busy. Because I am busy." Anthony moved closer, positioning himself between Silvio and the dining room. "And this conversation should happen elsewhere. Why? Because your fancy customers might hear the truth." Silvio's voice rose. "That their respected restaurateur is going soft? That he's letting some woman and her kid turn him into a—" He didn't finish the sentence. Anthony's hand shot out, gripping Silvio's upper arm with force that made the older man wince. Without another word, Anthony walked him toward the door. Not dragged. That would have been obvious. But the controlled power in Anthony's movement, the way Silvio had no choice but to follow or be pulled off balance, spoke volumes about who held authority. I watched through the front window as Anthony shoved Silvio onto the sidewalk with barely restrained violence. They exchanged words I couldn't hear. Anthony's face transformed into something cold and lethal. Then Silvio was walking away. His shoulders hunched, and Anthony stood alone under the streetlight, his hands flexing at his sides like he was fighting the urge to pursue. When he returned, the dining room had gone silent. Anthony addressed the room with perfect composure. "My apologies for the disturbance. Your dinners tonight are complimentary, courtesy of management." The gesture worked. Tension dissolved into pleased murmurs. Free food at Lombardi's was worth thousands. But I couldn't unsee what I'd witnessed. That flash of violence. The ease with which Anthony had handled a man who clearly used to command respect. The reminder that the gentle hands that adjusted my shooting stance on Saturday mornings were capable of breaking bones without hesitation. After closing, I found Anthony in his office, staring at security footage of the incident. "You saw." Not a question. Everyone saw. I leaned against the doorframe, maintaining distance. "Who is he?" "Silvio Verciani. One of my father's original crew. He's been with the organization for 30 years. Anthony's jaw tightened. He thinks that gives him the right to question my decisions. About us. About everything. He finally looked at me. Leadership in organizations like mine is constantly tested. Any sign of weakness invites challenges. Sentiment, compassion, caring about people beyond their usefulness. Those are all perceived as weaknesses. Are we your weakness? The question came out quieter than I intended. Ryan and me? The silence stretched too long. His lack of immediate denial was answer enough. "I can't keep being someone you have to protect," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I can't be the liability that gets you challenged by men like Silvio. I need to be able to defend myself. Defend Ryan. You're under my protection. Your protection makes me dependent." I pushed off the doorframe, moving closer. "I've been dependent my entire adult life. On Ryan's father's money until he left. On welfare. On whatever job would hire me. I'm done with that. Teach me." "Teach you what?" "How to fight. How to shoot. How to be something other than a civilian who needs guarding." I met his eyes directly. "You owe me that much. Your men attacked me. Put this target on my back. The least you can do is give me tools to survive it." Anthony studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Saturday, 9 in the morning. Wear clothes you can move in." The training started that weekend in the Hoboken House's basement, a space I'd assumed was just storage, but turned out to hold a private gym, complete with mats, weights, and a shooting range that made my jaw drop. "You have a shooting range in your basement. I have shooting ranges in several basements." Anthony handed me ear protection and safety glasses. "This is just the closest one." He started with basics. Stance, grip, breathing. The Glock he placed in my hands felt impossibly heavy. Alien. When I raised it toward the target 20 feet away, my arms trembled. "Relax your shoulders." His voice was patient. "You're holding all your tension there." I fired. The recoil shocked me, and the bullet went wide, missing the target entirely. Again, I fired 5 more rounds. One clipped the edge of the paper target. The rest disappeared into the reinforced wall beyond. "This is hopeless." I set the gun down, frustration burning through me. "I can't do this. You've been training for 15 minutes. Anthony moved behind me, his hands settling on my shoulders. "It takes weeks to build muscle memory. Months to become proficient. You're not going to master this in one session." Over the following weeks, Saturday mornings became our routine. Ryan would disappear into his library after breakfast, and Anthony would drill me relentlessly. Not just shooting, but hand-to-hand combat basics. How to break a grip, where to strike for maximum impact, how to use my smaller size as an advantage rather than a liability. I was terrible at all of it initially. I flinched before contact, pulled my punches, closed my eyes when pulling the trigger. But slowly, incrementally, I improved. My groupings tightened. My reaction times quickened. I stopped apologizing when I accidentally hit Anthony too hard during grappling practice. 3 weeks into training, he was adjusting my stance for the 100th time. I'd just fired 6 rounds, and 4 had hit center mass on the target. "Better," he said, his voice close to my ear. "But your elbow is still drifting." Like this. His hands slid down my arms, guiding them into position. His chest pressed against my back, solid and warm. I could feel his breath on my neck, smell the subtle cologne he always wore mixed with gun oil, and something uniquely him. "Lauren." My name came out rougher than usual. I turned my head slightly, and suddenly his face was inches from mine. Those dark eyes, usually so controlled, showed something raw. Want, need, hunger tempered by restraint that was visibly crumbling. We shouldn't. Even as I said it, I leaned back into him. "I know." His hand rose, fingertips brushing my jawline. "But tell me you don't feel this too. Tell me I'm imagining it." "You're not imagining it." The confession felt dangerous and necessary. "But Anthony," This complicates everything. I work for you. You're protecting us. There's too much power imbalance. Too much— Mom! Ryan's voice carried down the stairs. Lunch is ready. Teresa made lasagna. We sprang apart like teenagers caught by parents. Anthony stepped back, running a hand through his hair, while I fumbled with the gun's safety before setting it down. We should— I gestured vaguely toward the stairs. Yeah, he cleared his throat. We should talk about this. Later, he agreed. But as we climbed the stairs, tension humming between us like a live wire, I knew later might be the most dangerous word we'd spoken all morning. The baby monitor crackled to life at 2 a.m. I'd forgotten it was still plugged in downstairs, a relic from when Ryan was younger that Teresa had set up in case he needed me during the night. Now it broadcast something I wasn't meant to hear. Why don't you just tell her? Ryan's voice, small but determined. Tell her what? Anthony sounded tired in a way I'd never heard before. That you love my mom. That you want us to stay forever. Not just until it's safe. Silence stretched so long I thought the connection had died. Then Anthony spoke, his voice rough. How did you— I'm 8, not stupid. You come every weekend. You cook for us. You check my homework. You look at her the way Dad never looked at anyone in the books I read. A pause. You're scared. Yes. The admission was barely audible. I'm terrified. Because people I care about get hurt. My entire family died because someone wanted to hurt my father. If I let myself love your mother, if I let myself believe we could be a real family, I'm painting targets on both of you. We already have targets. Ryan's logic was devastating. Bad people already know about us. So you might as well be honest. I stood in the hallway, my hand pressed to my mouth, emotions warring inside me, anger that they'd discussed this without me, fear at what Anthony's admission meant, and underneath it all, an attraction I'd been fighting for weeks that suddenly felt inevitable as gravity. Before I could decide whether to confront them or retreat, my phone rang. Marco's name flashed on the screen. Lauren, don't come to the restaurant tomorrow. His voice was tight with urgency. Anthony's orders. There's been chatter. Yamaguchi activity. He wants you home until it settles. What kind of activity? The kind that means everyone associated with Anthony needs to be careful. He paused. Just stay in Hoboken. Vincent's team is doubling security. I hung up, my earlier eavesdropping forgotten in the face of renewed danger. But Anthony had different plans. The next morning, he insisted on a meeting at Lombardi's despite the warnings. Something about not showing fear, not letting threats dictate operations. I'm coming with you, I said. Absolutely not. You just made me sommelier. Missing Tuesday dinner service looks like fear. You said yourself, weakness invites challenges. I held his gaze. I'm coming. He recognized the determination in my voice. The same stubbornness that had made me survive 8 years as a single mother. Stay in the back. If anything feels wrong, you leave immediately. Tuesday evening, Lombardi's hummed with its usual refined energy. Wealthy couples celebrating anniversaries. Business deals conducted over wine and pasta. The beautiful machinery of expensive dining operating at peak efficiency. I consulted with a table about Piedmont Reds, recommended a Nebbiolo, smiled as they ordered a bottle that cost $400. Normal. Everything felt perfectly, deceptively normal. Until 9:30, when 6 Asian men entered through the front door. They moved with coordinated precision, 2 heading left, 2 right, 2 straight toward the center of the dining room. I saw the guns before most customers did. Compact, professional, held with the ease of people who'd used them before. Nobody moves. The leader's English was accented but clear. Nobody screams. You all live through this if you cooperate. Someone gasped. A wine glass shattered against the floor. Then silence, thick and suffocating. Lock the doors. The leader gestured, and his men moved to obey, sliding bolts, pulling shades, phones on the tables, all of them. Now, I was near the bar, partially hidden behind a decorative pillar. Slowly, I set down the wine bottle I'd been holding and pulled my phone from my pocket. Around the room, others did the same. 15 customers, 6 staff members. All of us suddenly hostages. The young waitress beside me, Isabella, was 19 and new. She started hyperventilating, panic attack building. "Breathe," I whispered, pulling her down behind the bar. "Slow breaths. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Stay quiet." The leader moved through the room, examining faces, checking security. When his gaze landed on me, recognition flared. "You." He moved closer. "The woman with the cherry blossoms. The sommelier everyone talks about." Something like satisfaction crossed his features. "Perfect." He pulled out a phone, started recording video. "Anthony Lombardi, you know who I am. You know what we want. The Brooklyn Port Territory. You surrender control by midnight tomorrow, or we start executing hostages." He grabbed my arm, yanked me from behind the bar into the frame. "Starting with your pet sommelier. You have 24 hours. He sent the video, then smiled at me. "Now we wait." "They won't negotiate." I kept my voice steady despite my racing heart. "You know that. This just ends in more death. Then you should hope your boss values your life more than his territory." He pushed me toward a chair. "Sit. Don't move." Minutes crawled by. Customers sat frozen, some crying silently. Staff exchanged terrified glances. I watched the Yamaguchi men position themselves strategically, covering exits, maintaining sight lines. Professional. Prepared for resistance. The leader's phone rang 30 minutes later. He answered, spoke in rapid Japanese, then smiled coldly. "Your boss is outside, with many men. This is about to become interesting." Through the front windows, I could see shapes moving in darkness. Anthony's security team, surrounding the building. And somewhere out there, Anthony himself, calculating odds, weighing options. The leader pressed his gun to my temple. "Tell him to back away or I paint these walls with your brain." "He won't back away." I met his eyes directly. "But he also won't risk civilian lives with a direct assault. You're at a stalemate. Then maybe I need to change the dynamic." His finger moved toward the trigger. "Wait." The word came out sharper than intended. "Let the others go. The customers who have nothing to do with this. If you want leverage over Anthony, I'm all you need. I'm the one he'll trade for." The leader studied me. "You volunteer to stay while others leave?" "I volunteer to stop innocent people dying because of a war they don't understand." My voice steadied. "Release them. Keep me. Prove you're soldiers, not murderers." He considered this, then barked orders in Japanese. His men opened the doors. "Customers only. Staff stays. Anyone who runs gets shot in the back." 15 terrified people scrambled for the exit. I watched them flood into the night, toward safety, toward police and ambulances that were surely gathering. The leader turned back to me. Brave or stupid? Practical. I glanced toward the bar. "Now what?" "Now we wait for your boss to realize he has a choice. Give us what we want, or lose what he values." 45 minutes later, chaos erupted in the form of fire alarm bells. I didn't remember making the decision to move. My hand just reached behind the bar, found the manual pull station and yanked. Sprinklers exploded overhead, instantly soaking everything. Confusion erupted. Staff bolted for exits. The Yamaguchi spun, trying to cover multiple targets simultaneously. Gunfire shattered windows. Anthony's men returning fire from outside. Glass exploded inward. Bullets punched through walls. I dropped behind the marble bar, crawling toward where I'd hidden my gun weeks ago in a gap between shelves. The weapon Anthony had given me during training. A Yamaguchi man vaulted over the bar, saw me, raised his weapon. I fired first, the recoil familiar now after weeks of practice. The bullet caught his thigh. He went down screaming. Then Anthony was there, pulling me against him, his body covering mine as an explosion rocked the building. The gas line from the kitchen, ruptured by bullets or fire or fate. Heat washed over us, followed by smoke thick and choking. "Lauren!" Anthony's voice in my ear, hoarse with fear and relief. "Are you hurt?" I couldn't answer. Shock was setting in, the reality of what had just happened crashing through my adrenaline. People were dead. I'd shot someone. The restaurant was burning. Fire trucks and police vehicles surrounded the building, their sirens cutting through the night. Anthony kept me pressed against him as we stumbled outside into air that tasted like smoke and cordite and survival. Behind us, Lombardi's blazed, flames consuming everything we'd built. 3 Yamaguchi dead, including the leader. 2 wounded and captured. One of Anthony's men hadn't made it out. And me, standing in the wreckage of my new life, unable to stop shaking as Anthony held me like I might disappear if he let go. 2 days had passed since the confrontation in the kitchen, since Anthony's unintentional confession that he cared too much to risk me. 2 days of careful distance, of polite conversation over breakfast, while Ryan watched us with those knowing eyes that saw far too much for an 8-year-old. The tension was suffocating. Every time Anthony reached for something near me, every accidental brush of hands, every moment our eyes met across the dining table, it all felt charged with something waiting to detonate. We were circling each other like boxers in a ring, waiting for someone to throw the first punch. Wednesday night, I couldn't sleep. The house in Hoboken felt too large, too empty, despite the security team outside. I padded downstairs for water, moving quietly through the dark kitchen. That's when I heard their voices, faint but clear, coming from the baby monitor on the counter. Teresa must have plugged it in again, worried about Ryan after his nightmares had briefly returned following news reports about the warehouse attack. "Why don't you just tell her?" Ryan's voice, determined despite the late hour. I froze, my hand halfway to the glass cabinet. Tell her what? Anthony sounded exhausted in a way I'd never heard. Not the controlled fatigue of long workdays, but something deeper. Defeated. That you love my mom. That you want us to stay forever, not just until it's safe. The glass I'd been reaching for slipped from my numb fingers, caught at the last second before it could shatter. I pressed my palm against the counter, listening to my heart hammer against my ribs. "How did you—" Anthony started. "I'm 8, not stupid." Ryan's logic was devastating in its simplicity. "You come every weekend. You cook for us. You check my homework. You look at her the way the prince looks at Cinderella in the story. And she looks back the same way when you're not watching. Ryan, it's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because people I care about get hurt." Anthony's voice cracked slightly. "My entire family died because someone wanted to hurt my father. If I let myself love your mother, if I let myself believe we could be a real family, I'm painting targets on both of you that are already there. We already have targets." The 8-year-old wisdom stopped my breath. "Bad people already know about us, the Yamaguchi people, so you might as well be honest instead of pretending you don't care when everyone can see you do." Silence stretched so long I thought they'd stop talking. Then Anthony spoke, his voice rough. "When did you get so smart? Mom says I get it from her. But I think I get it from you too. You teach me stuff, how to think about problems, how to be brave, even when you're scared." A pause. "Are you scared of loving us?" "Terrified." "That's dumb. We're not scary." Despite everything, I almost laughed. Leave it to Ryan to cut through layers of adult complexity with childlike directness. "No, you're not," Anthony agreed. "But losing you would be. Failing to protect you would be. Making your mother a widow before she's even a wife. That terrifies me more than anything I've faced. I should have walked away. Should have given them privacy. Instead, I stood frozen in my kitchen, processing emotions that felt too large for my chest to contain. Anger that they'd discuss this without me. Fear at what Anthony's admission meant for all our futures. And underneath it all, an attraction I'd been fighting that suddenly felt as inevitable as sunrise. My phone shattered the moment, vibrating violently against the counter. Marco's name flashed on the screen. "Lauren." His voice was tight with urgency. "Change of plans. Anthony needs you at the restaurant tomorrow night. Dinner service. Important clients who specifically requested your wine recommendations. I thought I was staying in Hoboken until Anthony's orders. He says it's safe now. Security will be doubled. Vincent will drive you personally." He paused. "He also says to wear the navy dress, the one from the formal wardrobe." After hanging up, I stood in the dark kitchen, listening to footsteps upstairs as Anthony and Ryan ended their conversation. Tomorrow night at Lombardi's. Important clients, doubled security. Something about it felt wrong, but I couldn't articulate why. Thursday evening arrived gray and threatening, clouds heavy with coming rain. Vincent drove me to Manhattan in silence, his usual easy demeanor replaced with professional alertness. At the restaurant, staff moved with nervous energy that set my teeth on edge. "Big night," Isabella, the young waitress, whispered as we set up the dining room. "Mr. Lombardi invited some important people. From Tokyo, I heard. Something about negotiations." Tokyo, Yamaguchi territory. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. "Where's Anthony?" I grabbed Marco's arm as he passed. "Upstairs. Why?" "This is a setup. Tell me this isn't him using me as bait after I suggested it and he refused." Marco's expression confirmed my fear before his words did. "He has it under control. Everything's calculated. You're completely safe." "That's not what I asked." Before Marco could respond, Anthony appeared at the top of the stairs, dressed in a dark suit that made him look both powerful and dangerous. His eyes found mine, and something passed between us. Apology, determination, resignation. "Lauren." He descended the stairs with measured steps. "I need you to trust me. You're using me as bait, not a question. I'm ending this, permanently. The Yamaguchi leadership is coming tonight to discuss territory negotiations. They want to see you're here, working, unafraid. It sends a message." "What kind of message?" "That we don't hide, that we don't let threats dictate our operations." His jaw tightened. "That you're under my protection, and any organization that wants peace needs to acknowledge that. And if they don't want peace, then we have 15 men positioned throughout the building and neighborhood. You're safer here tonight than you've been anywhere else." He moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, see the tension in his shoulders. "I won't let anything happen to you. You can't promise that. Watch me." The clients arrived at 8, 6 impeccably dressed Japanese businessmen who moved with the coordinated grace of trained fighters. They occupied the private dining room in the back, the same room where Anthony and I had first met what felt like lifetimes ago. I was assigned to their table specifically, my role to recommend wines and demonstrate normalcy. The leader, a man in his 50s with silver hair and calculating eyes, spoke perfect English. "You are Lauren Mitchell, the sommelier everyone discusses." "I am." I kept my voice steady. "What can I tell you about our wine selection tonight?" For 90 minutes, I played my role. Recommended a Barolo for the Primi, suggested a Brunello for the Secondi, explained terroir and vintage variations with the expertise Giovanni had drilled into me. The Yamaguchi men were polite, attentive, asking intelligent questions about Italian wine regions. Normal. Everything felt deceptively, horrifyingly normal. Until it wasn't. At 9:30, the front door burst open. Not the careful entrance of the negotiators, but violent entry. 6 more men, younger, armed, moving with military precision. The careful negotiations in the back room exploded into chaos, as the older Yamaguchi men realized they'd been betrayed by their own organization's radical faction. Younger members who wanted war, not peace. "Nobody moves!" The youngest leader couldn't have been more than 30, his gun tracking across terrified customers. "Phones on tables, now." I was near the bar, half hidden behind a decorative pillar. Around me, 15 customers and 6 staff members froze in various stages of dinner service. Then gunfire erupted from outside, Anthony's security team engaging with more Yamaguchi who'd been waiting in vehicles. The windows shattered inward, glass exploding across the dining room. Everything slowed and accelerated simultaneously. The young Yamaguchi leader grabbed me, using me as a human shield as he backed toward the kitchen. His gun pressed cold against my temple. "Tell Lombardi he has 1 hour to surrender Brooklyn territory or I paint these walls with your brain." Through the chaos, I saw Anthony burst through the front entrance, Marco and Luca flanking him. Our eyes met across the smoke and confusion. I saw him calculate odds, measure distances, prepare to make whatever trade necessary. And I knew with absolute certainty he would sacrifice everything, territory, power, his organization's respect, to save me. Which meant I needed to save myself. The fire alarm pull station was 3 feet to my left. If I could just... The Yamaguchi leader's grip loosened fractionally as he shouted something in Japanese to his men. I dropped my weight suddenly, throwing him off balance, and lunged for the alarm. Red lights flashed. Sprinklers exploded overhead, drenching everything in seconds. Confusion erupted into chaos. Staff ran for exits, customers scrambled under tables, and Anthony's men opened fire from outside, returning shots that punched through walls and furniture with devastating precision. I hit the floor, crawling toward the bar where I'd hidden the Glock Anthony had given me months ago. My fingers found it just as a Yamaguchi soldier vaulted over the marble, saw me, raised his weapon. I fired. 3 times. Center mass like Anthony had taught me. He went down. Then Anthony was there, pulling me against him, his body covering mine as an explosion rocked the building. The gas line. Someone's bullet had ruptured the kitchen's gas line. Heat washed over us, followed by smoke thick enough to choke. Anthony pressed my face against his chest, covering my mouth with his hand as we crawled toward the emergency exit. Behind us, Lombardi's, the restaurant that had given me a new life, new purpose, new hope, burned. We burst into the alley together, gasping for air that tasted like smoke and survival. Fire trucks wailed in the distance. Police vehicles surrounded the block, their lights painting everything in strobes of red and blue. Anthony pulled me into a doorway across the street, his hands running over me frantically, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt? Lauren, are you hurt?" "I shot someone." The words came out flat, disconnected from emotion. "I shot him and he went down, and I don't know if he's dead. You survived. That's all that matters." His hands cupped my face, forcing me to meet his eyes. "You survived because you were smart and brave and everything I knew you were. Your restaurant is just a building. Buildings can be rebuilt." His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, wiping away soot or tears or both. "You can't. If I'd lost you, you would have survived. You always do." "No." His voice broke on the word. "Not without you. Not anymore." Around us, emergency vehicles converged. Paramedics swarmed toward survivors stumbling from the burning building. Police shouted orders, establishing perimeter. In the chaos, nobody noticed us. Just another couple caught in the crossfire, holding each other while the world burned. 3 Yamaguchi dead. Marco appeared at Anthony's shoulder, his face grim. 2 captured. The old guard in the private room wants to negotiate surrender. They're claiming the attack was unauthorized, rogue elements they didn't sanction. Tell them we'll discuss terms tomorrow, after I know everyone made it out. Anthony's arms tightened around me. Get Lauren home. Maximum security. I'll follow as soon as I can. No. I pulled back enough to see his face. Ryan. I need to get to Ryan. He'll see this on the news and... Vincent has him. He's safe at the house, doesn't know anything yet. Anthony's jaw tightened. But you should be there when we tell him, when we explain what happened. The drive back to Hoboken felt surreal. Vincent navigated streets slick with rain that had finally started falling, while I sat in the back seat processing everything. I'd shot someone tonight, maybe killed them, watched Anthony's dream burn, proven that no matter how far we ran, violence followed, and somehow, impossibly, I was still alive. 3 weeks after the attack, I sat in a different kitchen in a different home, watching gray afternoon light filter through windows that overlooked Central Park. The apartment in the Upper West Side was beautiful, all hardwood floors and crown molding, and the kind of space that screamed old Manhattan money. It was also temporary, a safe house while Anthony's people quietly sold the Hoboken property. Too many bad memories there, he'd said. Too many nightmares trapped in those walls. Ryan's nightmares had returned with a vengeance. Dr. Park had increased his sessions to 3 times weekly, and still I'd wake to his screams at 2 a.m, his small body thrashing against sheets soaked with sweat. The regression was heartbreaking. My confident 8-year-old who'd started making friends and excelling at school was now afraid of loud noises, flinched at sirens, couldn't sleep without every light in the apartment blazing. And it was my fault. That knowledge sat in my chest like a stone, heavy and immovable. I'd chosen to stay in Anthony's world. I'd suggested using myself as bait. I'd fired a gun and watched a man fall and walked through fire while my son waited at home, unaware his mother might not return. Vincent's team had told Ryan what happened, careful and clinical. Your mother was involved in an incident at the restaurant. She's safe. Everything's under control. But Ryan had seen the news footage before they could stop him. Lombardi's engulfed in flames, bodies carried out on stretchers, police cars and ambulances and chaos. He'd asked me once, 3 days after, if I'd killed anyone. I couldn't lie to him. Yes, I'd said, my voice breaking on the word. I defended myself. I did what I had to do to survive. He'd nodded, processing this information with the same analytical approach he used for math problems. Then he'd asked if I was okay. Not physically. If I felt okay about what I'd done. I still didn't have an answer. Anthony had disappeared the day after the attack. Marco delivered updates in person. Negotiations were ongoing. Territorial agreements being hammered out. Peace being brokered through channels I didn't fully understand. The Yamaguchi's local leadership had been decimated, their aggressive faction exposed and embarrassed. The older guard, the men who'd been in the private dining room trying to negotiate peace when everything went sideways, had seized the opportunity to regain control. A neutral party, a Cosa Nostra family with no stake in New York territories, had stepped in to mediate. Anthony was in meetings somewhere, doing what he did, wielding power and making deals that would reshape the criminal landscape of 3 boroughs. And I was here, in this borrowed apartment, watching my son struggle and wondering if the cost of safety had been too high. When the knock came on the apartment door that gray Thursday afternoon, I checked the security monitor before answering. Anthony stood in the hallway, and my breath caught. He looked terrible. Thinner, cheekbones more pronounced, dark circles under eyes that seemed to have aged years in 3 weeks. His suit hung differently, like he'd lost weight he couldn't afford to lose. "Can I come in?" His voice was rougher than I remembered. I stepped aside, let him enter. He moved through the space with careful attention, checking corners and windows with the automatic vigilance of someone who'd survived too many ambushes. "Ryan?" he asked. "Therapy. Vincent took him. They'll be back in an hour." "Good. We need to talk." We settled in the kitchen, sitting across from each other at the small breakfast table. Afternoon light cast shadows across his face, emphasizing the exhaustion there. "It's over," he said finally. "The Yamaguchi have agreed to a territorial truce. They keep everything south of Canal Street. We maintain control of Brooklyn and the ports. Neutral mediators will handle disputes for the next 5 years. After that, we'll renegotiate." What did it cost? Concessions, money, pride. His jaw tightened. 3 of my businesses in Chinatown. A percentage of port revenues. My reputation as someone who doesn't compromise. The men who had once muttered about him going soft had their answer now. Whatever they thought of his choices, none of them dared question that protecting Ryan and me came first. Carlo and Stefano were gone from his world for good, their punishment handled quietly in ways he never described, and I no longer asked about. But we're safe. You're safe. Ryan's safe. That's all that matters. He leaned back, and I saw how much the past weeks had taken from him. Which brings me to why I'm here. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, setting it on the table between us. Inside are 2 new identities. Social security numbers, birth certificates, driver's licenses, complete histories. Lauren Mitchell becomes Sarah Thompson. Ryan Mitchell becomes Jake Thompson. Mother and son from Cleveland, relocating to wherever you choose. My heart stopped. What? There's also a bank routing number for an account containing $100,000. Untraceable, completely yours. And contact information for a man in Chicago who can help you establish new lives. Jobs, housing, schools, whatever you need. You're sending us away. I'm giving you a choice. His hands flexed on the table. 3 weeks ago, you almost died because of me. Ryan's having nightmares because I brought violence into your lives. You shot someone. You watched people die. You lost the job you loved because my restaurant burned down. That's not... Let me finish. His voice was gentle but firm. I can't undo what happened. I can't give you back the life you had before Carlo and Stefano attacked you in that bar. But I can give you this, a clean start. New identities, financial security, complete freedom from my world and everything it entails. I stared at the envelope. New names, new lives. The escape I'd been dreaming of for months, offered without strings or conditions. What about you? The question came out quieter than intended. I stay here, run what's left of my organization. Rebuild Lombardi's or open something new. Keep doing what I've always done. He met my eyes directly. without putting you and Ryan in danger anymore. Is that what you want? What I want doesn't matter. Pain flickered across his face. You need to understand something, Lauren. My life will always have violence at the edges. Always have threats and dangers, and moments when people I care about become targets. I thought I could protect you. Thought I could keep you safe while keeping you close. I was wrong. The safest thing for you and Ryan is to be as far from me as possible. Silence filled the kitchen. Outside, traffic sounds drifted up. Horns, sirens, the constant hum of the city. I thought about Cleveland or Phoenix or Seattle or anywhere that wasn't here. Thought about Ryan in a normal school, making normal friends, growing up without bodyguards and security cameras and the knowledge that his mother had killed someone. I thought about a life without Anthony Lombardi in it. No, the word hung in the air between us. No? He leaned forward, confusion and hope warring in his expression. I don't want to run anymore. I don't want to hide behind a fake name in a city where nobody knows me. I pushed the envelope back across the table. I don't want a life that doesn't have you in it. Lauren, I love you. The confession came out steady, certain. I've been in love with you since those Saturday mornings when you'd show up with ingredients and cook for us like we were a family. Maybe before that. I fought it because it scared me. Because loving you meant accepting your world. But I can't fight it anymore. You saw what my world does. You lived through it. I did. And it was terrible and traumatic. And I have my own nightmares now. I reached across the table, taking his hands in mine. But I also saw you coordinate a rescue operation. Saw you negotiate peace when war would have been easier. Saw you willing to sacrifice territory and pride and power to keep us safe. That's who you are, Anthony. Not just the violence and danger, but the man who cooks on Saturdays and checks Ryan's homework and looks at me like I'm something precious. You deserve better. You deserve safe and normal, and I deserve to choose. And I choose this. I choose you. I choose the complicated, dangerous, imperfect reality of being with you over the safe fantasy of running away. His hands tightened around mine. It won't be easy. Nothing worth having ever is. There will always be threats. Always be people who see you as a way to hurt me. Then we deal with them. Together. I stood, moving around the table to where he sat. I'm done being afraid. Done running. Done pretending I don't love you because it's complicated. Anthony rose, his hands coming up to frame my face. You really understand what you're saying yes to. I've seen the worst of your world. The violence, the chaos, the cost. And I'm still here. Still choosing you. Still choosing us. God help me, I love you. The words came out rough, raw. I've loved you since that first night when you walked into my restaurant bleeding and defiant, and more brave than anyone I'd ever met. But loving you terrifies me because I kissed him, cutting off whatever fear he was about to voice. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me against him with desperate strength. The kiss was nothing like the almost moment in the basement weeks ago. This was unguarded, unafraid, the culmination of months of denial and distance and longing finally given permission to exist. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. The apartment door opened, and we heard Ryan's voice calling out. Mom, I'm home. We pulled apart but stayed close. Ryan appeared in the kitchen doorway, stopped when he saw us standing together. His eyes moved between us, taking in our proximity, our intertwined hands, the obvious shift in whatever had existed before. Then he smiled. Not the forced, polite expression he'd been wearing for weeks, but a genuine, relieved smile that made him look like a child again. Finally, he said, I thought you guys were never going to figure it out. Anthony laughed, the sound surprising and wonderful. That obvious? Totally obvious. Ryan set down his backpack. So, does this mean we're staying? Not moving away? We're staying, I confirmed. If that's okay with you. He nodded seriously. It's okay. I like it here. I like Anthony. And Dr. Park says running away from scary things doesn't make them less scary. It just makes them follow you. Smart therapist, Anthony said. Really smart. She says I'm making progress. Ryan's expression grew more serious. The nightmares are getting better. Slower than I want, but better. I pulled him into a hug, this resilient, brave, too wise child who'd survived too much. We're going to be okay, all of us. Together. Like a family? Ryan's voice was muffled against my shoulder. Anthony and I exchanged glances over Ryan's head. Yeah, I said. Like a family. Months passed with the kind of gradual healing that can't be rushed. The Hoboken house sold to a family with 3 kids who'd never know about the violence its walls had witnessed. We stayed in the Upper West Side apartment, which slowly transformed from a temporary safe house to home. Ryan's nightmares decreased in frequency. His therapist reported breakthrough after breakthrough. He returned to school with increased security that he'd learned to accept as normal. Anthony opened a new restaurant in Chelsea, smaller than Lombardi's, more intimate, with a focus on Northern Italian cuisine. He asked me to design the wine program from scratch, to build something uniquely mine. The work was consuming and creative and exactly what I needed to process my own trauma through purpose. Ryan helped choose artwork for the walls, bringing his careful 8-year-old aesthetic to decisions about which pieces conveyed the right atmosphere. He took ownership of the project with serious dedication, consulting art books from his beloved library and presenting reasoned arguments for his selections. The restaurant opened to rave reviews. Critics praised the food, the ambiance, and especially the wine program. Innovative pairings curated by a sommelier who understood storytelling through taste. Giovanni wrote from Tuscany with a rare, almost grudging congratulations, adding that he expected a proper tour the next time he came through New York. One Sunday evening, 4 months after the attack, the 3 of us sat in the apartment for dinner. Anthony had cooked, his grandmother's recipe for osso buco, paired with a Barolo I'd selected. After we'd cleared the dishes, Ryan challenged Anthony to a video game tournament. I watched from the sofa, cradling a cup of tea, as they argued good-naturedly about strategy and cheating and whether button mashing counted as skill. Ryan was laughing, really laughing, the sound light and unguarded. Anthony's arm draped casually across the back of the couch, his other hand working the controller with surprising competence for someone who'd probably never played video games before Ryan entered his life. This wasn't the family I'd imagined when I was 21 and pregnant and terrified. It wasn't safe or normal or anything I could have predicted, but it was ours, built from violence and fear and survival, held together by love that had grown in the spaces between danger. "Mom, tell him he can't use that move. It's basically cheating," Ryan protested, pointing at the screen. "That move is completely legal," Anthony countered. "Your mother agrees with me. Right, Lauren?" I smiled, took a sip of tea. "I'm staying out of this. You two figure it out." They returned to their game, and I returned to my observation. Over time, we'd built something imperfect and real, and worth fighting for. I no longer waited for Jason to call, or for my parents to change their minds. The life they'd turned their backs on had kept growing without them, roots sinking deeper into this strange, dangerous, beautiful version of home. Family came in unexpected forms. Sometimes it was forged in fire and terror. Sometimes it was chosen rather than given. Sometimes it looked nothing like the storybooks promised. But it was still family. And we were still here, still together, still surviving. That would always be the victory that mattered most. The end.